Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at Tamiya's 1/48 scale Grumman F4F-4 Wildcat. This kit was tooled in the 90s, so let's see how it fares today. So here you can see I'm getting the one-piece seat cemented to one of the back walls with the framing. Pretty straightforward process here, nothing really going on. And believe it or not, we are already on to paint. So I had primed everything in a Vallejo matte black primer, or a gloss black primer, and I'm going to be doing a technique called black basting. What this technique basically entails is this. So you prime all your parts in a uniform coating of your black primer, and then you take your color of choice, in my case it's that zinc chromate color, and you kind of model it in the middle of panels. And then when you go over with your uniform color, it leaves those panels, or the sections of the panels that you didn't paint over, darker and more shaded, and just provides some natural shading and a different kind of tone to each little bit of paint. It just gives the paint another level of life, which is why I'm trying to do it here. So here you'll see in a second the effect that I was trying to go for prior to going over with my uniform coating. There you can see the center of panels were painted in the green, and around the actual panel lines and raised detail it was left black. I'm going to be doing the same effect here on the sides of the rear bracing here, the rear framing, and the seat. And then we'll get it all painted up with the uniform color. Just following the same black basing technique on the side walls of the cockpit here, and then all the parts will receive their uniform coating of the paint at the same time. Getting the pilot seat and the rear bulkhead painted up now with the uniform coating. If you're going to be copying the same technique that I'm doing here, I recommend spraying at about 15 psi. I sprayed at about 15 to 16 psi and just built up, I think it was 2 thin layers. Because if you build up your layers all at once, if you do just kind of one thick layer, it'll drown out that modeling that you had done before, and just completely gets rid of the effect that you're going for. So the sidewalls were painted off camera. Here you can see me putting them together. Each sidewall has 2 pieces that go together to form the full console. Pretty simple process here. And here you can see me detailing up some of the parts in black. After looking at some reference pictures, I kind of determined that the instructions were quite accurate to whatever sections in the cockpit had to be painted, so I just followed the instructions and it got me fairly close to what they looked like in real life. Not exactly, but close enough to where it's accurate. So the instrument panel was painted off camera. All these parts are going to receive a gloss coating, and here you can see I have a small piece of paper towel dampened in an aluminum paint, and I'm just kind of, for lack of a better word, sponge chipping it on. It's the same technique that you would use with sponge chipping, but I'm just using a paper towel instead of a sponge, and it gives a fairly similar effect, which is what I was going for. There you just saw the seat and the bracing were cemented onto the main assembly, and here I'm hitting the cockpit with a brown wash, just to get that dirt and grime into some of those panel lines there, and ribbing on the floor, and just kind of bring out all that detail and make the cockpit look a little more grubby. Getting the main instrument panel with the side console cemented in place now. Alignment is key here because the 2 side consoles glue onto the instrument panel and they all kind of slot and lock into place, almost like a jigsaw puzzle. So just make sure that you have your alignment right when you're gluing those sidewalls in and you'll be good. So here's the cockpit all finished up. You can see I added some masking tape seatbelts just to bring another level of life to the model, as I felt the seat looked a little bit kind of naked without them. So those masking tape seatbelts, even though they're not completely accurate, they just bring another level of life to the cockpit. Here I'm detailing up the rear wall of the wheel well. There's 3 chains here that have to get painted in a silver, so I'm just getting that painted up there, sorry. And then that'll get cemented onto the front of the cockpit tub. So getting that glued up now to the front, you can see there's 3 really big locating pins, and they all slot into place perfectly with the perfect angle. So the instructions dictate that you glue the 2 fuselage halves together and then cement the cockpit tub in, and I was a little bit skeptical about this just because I didn't know how well the fit would be, and it wasn't that good in the end. There was a little bit of a gap around the rear bulkhead with the headrest that I couldn't really sort out. So that was a little bit annoying, but I mean, at the end of the day, it is what it is. So we just spent about 4 or 5 minutes working on the cockpit talking about it, so I figured I'd show you guys a quick photo of it here, just to kind of show you all the detail that was in there because you didn't really see it too well in the video. So coming up here is a picture that I took of the cockpit, and hopefully that kind of does all the detail justice. It's still not perfect, but you know. So there was the finished cockpit. I think it looks pretty good. Back onto the model now. Here you can see I'm getting the wings cemented to the fuselage. There was an audible snap here when I got them in place. I love when parts snap. It's very satisfying. I think it's just that bit of extra security. You know that part's in place and you know that's not going to move. It's just, oh, it's awesome. So here we are getting the rudder in place. I'm not gluing this just because I need to be able to get the horizontal stabilizers on after. But I'm leaving the horizontal stabilizers off to paint just to avoid masking. So that's why I'm not gluing the rudder in place. I need to be able to pop it back off after, sorry. Here I am detailing up the radial engine. There's quite a bit of detail here. Tamiya tooled a pretty nice looking engine. They actually had the ignition wires molded in, so I decided to pick those out. And if you're following along with this kit, I do recommend spending a bit of time here just because there's quite a bit of detail on the engine. And on the finished model, you can actually see quite a lot of the engine through the cowling. It sits quite close to the opening of the cowling, so if you're following along, do spend a bit of time here, just because on the finished model you can see quite a bit of that detail. So here you can see I have a sharpened piece of sprue, and I'm using that to pick out the ignition wires. The reason I'm using a sharpened piece of sprue and not something like a paintbrush is because a paintbrush has a bit of give to it, so it would be a lot easier to get paint on other parts of the engine because of that bit of give and the way the bristles move. So with a hard point like a sharpened piece of sprue, you're only getting paint where you're pressing down, and it just allows you to get a lot more fine detail in there. So we're going to give the engine a brown wash here now. This is the same wash that was used in the cockpit, just because there's a lot of recessed detail on the engine and I wanted to kind of pick all that out, so we're just using this wash here to kind of accentuate all those little details that are put in there. So we're just getting the last bit of that wash put in. It looks pretty good. Here you can see the engine is glued up. Here we're getting the gear reduction housing glued in place. Put a bit of a wash on that as well. And here is a picture of the engine in its final form. I think it looks pretty good. So here I am painting up the horizontal stabilizers. You might notice next to the airbrush there's a little bit of an overhang on the center tab. It hangs out a little more on the left than it does on the right. And that's to help the aileron get into place, or help the horizontal stabilizers get into place, sorry, not the aileron. And I'm actually painting this upside down. This part here is supposed to be getting painted blue, not white. And I didn't realize this until the end of the build. So what I did to fix the problem was I clipped that little bit of an overhang off and just slid it in place the opposite way, and it worked out fine. Coming back in with the uniform coating now. In the last build video was my F15C by Revell. I didn't record much of the painting, so in this video I'm going to be trying to record a lot more of the painting process. If you guys like seeing the painting process as much as you will in this video, please do let me know, and I'll make sure to keep that in mind for future videos. Or if you prefer it in the style of the Revell build where you just like to see a little bit of painting here and there, but not too much, let me know and I'll make sure to keep that in mind as well. Personally, I enjoy watching videos that have the whole painting process in them, but let me know what you guys prefer and I'll see what I can do for that. So here is that final effect. Looks very faded indeed, which is exactly what I was going for. So here we are getting the uniform coating of the paint sprayed down on the lower surfaces of the aircraft, the lower surfaces of the wings and the fuselage. I didn't record me putting down the modeling just because I feel like, personally, if I was watching a video and I saw the same modeling technique over and over again, it would get quite boring. But if that is something that you guys would like to see, if you'd like to see the painting process from start to finish, do let me know. So just getting these all sprayed up in a uniform coating, slowly building up the paint. I think I used 3 thin layers here just to keep a bit of the effect there. So as said at the beginning of this video, this kit was tooled in the 90s, and honestly, doing the voiceover now after completing this kit, it's a very good kit. I mean, it's over 20 years old, but it's an excellent kit. The fitment is excellent on the whole. I didn't have to use any filler. The paint went down perfectly with a few minor problems here and there that you'll see coming up shortly. But that wasn't down to Tamiya, that was just down to me. But yeah, overall, like the amount of rivets on this kit, the amount of panel lines on this kit, just everything on this kit was absolutely incredible. I mean, you had raised rivets, you had recessed rivets, you had recessed panel lines. It was a fantastic kit to put together, and I highly recommend it. So back to the kit here now. Just getting that final layer of paint put down. It looks fairly faded here right now. Some people would leave it at that, but I found that it was just a little bit too faded for my liking. I wanted to see a little bit more of that insignia white, so I put another thin layer on top of it just to tone it down that little bit more and leave the effect where I wanted it. So here you can see we have the upper surfaces masked off. At this point I had temporarily glued on the engine cowling. I painted that off camera, used the same pre-shading, the black basing effect. So here we're spraying down I believe it's a glossy sea blue by Vallejo. My favorite glossy sea blue color. My favorite sea blue color. Sorry, it's a beautiful color. It goes down well. It's fantastic. So just getting that sprayed down uniformly. Wasn't using a black basing technique here. We're going to be using post shading because it's very hard to get a good black basing effect on a color as dark as this over a black primer unless you're using something like a white instead of a lighter version or the regular version of the dark color. So I'm just spraying this down uniformly, and then we're going to go back in after with post shading to add any fading that we want. So as I mentioned earlier, here was the problem with the paintwork. The masking tape peeled up and it completely ripped off the primer. I have no idea why. It's a primer. It's supposed to stick to the model. Maybe I didn't wash my parts as well as I should have, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. I got it re-primed off camera, and then I painted that intermediate blue off camera. I didn't record it just because I was feeling a little bit bummed out after that point, but it was the exact same process as the dark sea blue, just the uniform coating. Then we're going to go back in with post shading after. Do get all the primer fixed up, so don't worry about that, but at that point in the build, it was really upsetting. So catching up with the build, here you can see I'm putting an oil wash, or not an oil wash, sorry, a panel line wash over the aircraft. This is the same brown wash that I use in the cockpit and on the engine. Just putting this in the panel lines, not actually covering the whole bottom of the aircraft in it, just because it leaves a bit of a green hue on light paint colors, even with a good gloss varnish. So I don't want the whole bottom of the aircraft to be like a brownish green color, so I'm just putting it in the areas around panel lines and letting capillary reaction do the rest. A second ago you saw I had the landing gear built up and I was taking the masks off of the wheel hubs. That was my first time doing wheel masks and I'm quite proud of it. Could have been better, but for my first time they came out pretty good. So here you can see the wash is all wiped off and it gave me the exact effect that I wanted. Left a little bit of green on the belly of the aircraft, but not too much. Here you can see I used that same wash on the intermediate blue parts just because it's a bit of a lighter blue. And here I'm using a white wash on the upper surfaces just because it's a bit of a darker color and the white would stand out better. All the wash has now been wiped off. I'm very happy with how this came out. This is one of my best wash jobs to date. Here you can see me getting the landing gear secured in place. At this point now I've sprayed on the exhaust staining. I sprayed that on off camera just because it was in a really kind of awkward area and I just wanted to be able to see what I was doing properly. Here you can see I just got the landing light glued in place, and here you can see I'm gluing the approach light in place on the leading edge of the left wing. Pretty straightforward process here. The inners of both of those areas were painted silver to mimic the kind of hue that lights have. Came out pretty good. So putting the propeller in place now with a bit of super glue. This was painted off camera just to make it easier on myself. Just spinning that to get the glue all spread around on the locating pin. Looks pretty good. Here you can see we got the exhaust stacks put in place. These were painted off camera, just using a silver and a bit of brown. Removing my homemade canopy masks here now. Fairly happy with how these came out. No varnish got in the inside of the canopy. No, I shouldn't say no varnish. A tiny bit of varnish got in the inside of the canopy, but we'll just put that down to salt. I mean, it's an aircraft that serves on an aircraft carrier. Naturally, there's going to be a little bit of salt accumulation on some of the parts. You can see it looks a little foggy there. That's actually not varnished. That's just the kit plastic was a little bit foggy. Don't know if that was on my kit specifically or if that's in every kit. If you're building this kit and you had a similar issue, please do let me know. Here I am cementing the pitot tube in place just with a bit of Tamiya extra thin. Probably should have used super glue here just to be a little bit extra careful, but I mean it is what it is. Stayed in place, so that's all I really care about. At this point in the build now the rigging can get secured, and that finishes this one up. If you've watched this far into the video, thank you very, very much for watching. It was greatly appreciated. I hope that maybe you'll consider subscribing so that you can see more builds like this in the future. I've got some really, really cool ones lined up. But yeah, enjoy the final photos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.